The desert evening spread like spilled wine across the horizon, the sky bruised violet and copper as though the sun had left its last wound upon the world. Noding rode slowly, his stallion's hoofs pressing shallow echoes into the dust. The saddle creaked beneath him, leather dry as old bone, and though the weight of gold jingled in his saddlebags, his chest felt as hollow as an abandoned mine. Rich, yes, but lonely in ways coin could never soften. He wondered, not for the first time, whether solitude could kill a man more thoroughly than hunger or bullets ever could. Then he saw it. A flicker of firelight shivered against the ridge, fragile but defiant against the thickening dusk. He should have ridden past. A cowboy knew better than to test strangers in a land where law was thinner than parchment and rumors sharper than knives. Yet his horse slowed, nostrils flaring at the smell riding the breeze, beans simmering low, bread crackling against the skillet's edge. Hunger tugged at him. And curiosity, always more dangerous, pulled harder still. He dismounted. She was crouched by the fire, back straight though her clothes sagged, patched from scraps of calico and wool, survival stitched into every seam. Apache, he saw it in the proud angle of her shoulders, in the long dark hair that fell loose around her face. Her hands were scarred from work, her cheeks marked faintly with old burns or battles he dared not guess. She did not startle at his approach. She did not beg or greet him kindly. She only turned her face slightly so he could see the faint scar tracing her cheekbone, and her voice, when it came, was low and steady as though rehearsed against countless rejections. "I ain't pretty, sir," she said, eyes never leaving the pot. "But I can cook." The words rooted him still. Not a plea, not an introduction, just a verdict she'd passed on herself, wrapped in quiet defiance. He felt them in his chest, heavier than the gold he carried. He wanted to ask why that was the first thing she chose to say, but the fire popped, sparks leaping, and silence filled the space like smoke. He sensed if he asked too quick, her courage might vanish. Boots crunching dry sage, he stepped closer. The air smelled of beans thick with spice, of cornbread browned on one side. His hunger betrayed him, and yet something else, stranger, stirred deeper, a pull toward the woman herself. The townsfolk's whispers haunted him, "Don't bring Apache trouble home, cowboy." Sheriff Boone's gravel voice had carved the warning into his skull. Yet here she was, stirring food with a steadiness that cut through all the noise of judgment. She ladled stew into a dented tin bowl and set it where he could reach without entering her circle. The gesture was not servile, not proud, merely survival offered plain. He took it, though his hand lingered longer than needed, testing whether she would flinch at his closeness. She did not. The first taste nearly undid him. Beans rich, smoky, touched with something beyond any ranch cook's hand. Comfort seeped through his hollow chest, as though this food carried more than flavor, perhaps memory, perhaps resilience. He wanted to speak, to ask her story, but her eyes stayed low, the silence daring him to eat before he questioned. "My people cast me out," she said at last, voice woven into the fire's hiss. "Said I was useless after my brother died. Too heavy a mouth to carry. I walked away." She turned the bread with careful fingers, though hunger pinched her cheeks. "Some men don't like to look at me. Some say I bring no luck. But a man's belly doesn't care about luck. Only food." Her chin lifted slightly at the end, like she wanted to believe her worth could still be measured in that. Noding swallowed hard. He thought of Clara May, the ranch cook he once loved, whose laughter filled rooms but who left him when she found softer company in town. He thought of how gold had never kept anyone from walking away. Here sat a woman who had nothing, who still saved the last slice of bread for him though her own stomach tightened with emptiness. He placed his bowl aside and, wordless, pulled off his gloves. A tattered blanket lay near her. He picked it up, threaded a needle through its torn edge. She stiffened but did not stop him. Their hands brushed, callous meeting callous, and the desert itself seemed to pause. She looked at him then, fully, and he saw fire in her eyes, not shame, not ugliness, but the raw beauty of survival. He laughed suddenly, low, startled, a sound he had not heard from himself in years. She blinked, startled too, then a shy smile touched her mouth, fleeting as dawn light over canyon stone. In that instant, his loneliness cracked open. Something warmer began to seep in. Then, hoofbeats. Distant, steady, carrying across the plain. Noding's gut tightened. Riders. Perhaps Boone's men, perhaps worse. He imagined their whispers, the rich cowboy feeding an Apache outcast. Weak. Foolish. Reputation could die faster than a dry creek under sun. Leotai, he knew her name now, spoken soft when he asked, lowered her gaze, already preparing for dismissal. She wore that posture-like armor, the weary readiness of one abandoned too many times. She did not beg. She simply braced for the moment he would send her into the night. But the riders did not stop. Their shadows crested the ridge, silhouettes swallowed by starlight, their hoofbeats fading into silence. Noding reached across the fire. Slowly, deliberately, he took her scarred hand in his own. His thumb traced the rough map of her skin, each mark a story of endurance, not shame. He leaned closer, voice a whisper meant only for her and the desert. "Pretty's a word too small for you." Her breath caught, half sob, half laugh. For the first time in years, she let her weight lean toward another's warmth, toward his and the fires together. The stew simmered low, the cornbread eaten, the air cool and silver with stars. Neither spoke further. They did not need to. Silence, shared and honest, was a vow. The desert will remember them. Even after the embers died, sagebrush whispered their story, and stars carried it farther than tongues ever could. It was not beauty that kept the cowboy from breaking. Not gold that kept the woman alive. It was small mercies, bread saved when she was starving, a blanket mended when he might have ridden past, a hand held when the world said let go. So remember this: worth is never in the faces men judge, nor in the wealth they count. Worth lives in the hands that choose to stay, even when leaving is easier. And perhaps, when your own night grows long and you sit by a lonely flame wondering if you are enough, you will recall their fire. You will know that someone, somewhere, will see you whole, not for names given or scars carried, but for what you offer, even in hunger. That is how two forgotten souls found each other in the wide and empty West. That is how loneliness loosened its hold. That is how a woman once told a cowboy she wasn't pretty, but showed him, with every act of grace, what beauty truly meant. And isn't that the kind of story the desert was born to keep?